So welcome to another edition of Open for Business. And today's guest is Wade Herring. He is a partner with HunterMaclean in Savannah, Georgia. Wade has over 35 years of legal experience, employment law. Wade, thank you so much for being on Open for Business.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're really glad for you to be here because there are so many unanswered questions right now during COVID. And I'm sure you're being inundated with your clients asking these questions. So I thought it would be really important that you share some of what's going on with all the other small business owners here. It would be a really big help. So.
Well, I think a lot of business owners are concerned about their employees, what's going on with their employees' health. But of course, an overriding issue is, what do I need to do to get my business to the other side of this? There's a lot of information out there right now. Most of it's good information. Some of it is really bad information. So it's easy to become overwhelmed and for there to be a difficulty in making a decision. So my number one thing for small business owners is you have to make decisions. And some of those decisions are going to be really hard.
Yeah.
The driver should be, what do I need to do to get to the other side of this? The legal issues inform that decision, but the number one decision is, how do I keep my business alive?
So what are you telling people? What steps do they need to take to make that happen? Like go after the loan or what?
Well, I think that before everything else is, how am I going to manage whatever liquidity I have, whatever kind of cash flow I have, whatever reserves I have to make it through. So one of those things is going to be necessarily laying off employees, and we can talk in a minute about whether that's permanent or temporary. But if you don't have any money coming in, you're not going to be able to pay your employees. The loan programs, the one that passed a week and a half ago, which seems like a long time ago, that money is gone. And the Congress has not yet agreed upon a second program. It's expected that they will, but they have not yet. But the $350 billion that you've heard about in the media, all of that money's gone right now. And it goes back to what I said before. The business owner has to make a decision about what's best for his or her business. Nobody's going to reach in and help save you. You have to do this.
So I'm going to ask you one of my three top questions here. So how does unemployment work now in the new COVID-19 reality?
Well, the good news is, for those employees that you have to discharge or lay off, there's some pretty generous benefits, at least compared to once upon a time. So before all of this started, unemployment benefits in Georgia range from a low of $55 a week to a high of $365 a week. And that's still the range in Georgia, but the federal government has added an additional $600 flat. So, and that's on top of whatever Georgia would award. So an employee, an ex-employee in Georgia could make as much as almost $1,000 a week on unemployment benefits. So that's one big change. The employer is required to file the claim. That's another big change. The employer does that weekly, does a spreadsheet, and the Department of Labor, Georgia Department of Labor, is understandably pretty overwhelmed right now. But all in all, I would say they've done a good job, better than other states, about getting set up for this and helping employers work through this. So a big plus for the business owner, as they make those hard decisions, is at least compared to what was once upon a time, the unemployment benefits are generous now.
Okay. I mean, is it an online form that they do, or do they need to go through an attorney? How do they do that?
No, no attorney necessary. It's an online form. The instructions are pretty self-explanatory. Again, you have to do it weekly, but once you've done it one time, it's pretty easy. And let me make this point. There may be weeks when you need to bring employees back for partial work or even a full week. Because you're filing this claim weekly, that's okay if you need to bring an employee back to do some work. Of course, you pay that employee for the work, but then you would report that on the unemployment claim.
And they could still do the claim and still collect unemployment.
Possibly, though, as I understand the rules, the employee can make up to $300 a week through work and still qualify for unemployment benefits.
Wow, interesting. Okay. So now I got another question for you. Here we go. What are the paid leave requirements?
All right, for businesses with 50 or more employees, those businesses have been subject since the Clinton administration to unpaid leave requirements for FMLA. What's new are paid leave requirements. And what's very interesting is that the Congress imposed these paid leave requirements on small businesses under 500 employees. Companies with more than 500 employees are exempt from paid leave requirements. If you have an issue with that, talk to your congressmen and senators. I'm not sure why those requirements were imposed on small businesses. But basically, there's 2 weeks of paid sick leave up to 80 hours, up to a maximum of $511 per day. And then there's an additional 10 weeks paid leave if your child is home from school. And if you have a child in school, everyone's child is home from school, a child under the age of 18, and that's up to $200 a day. However, there is an exception for businesses of less than 50 employees, and it's an economic hardship exception. And what the Department of Labor has said, you do the paperwork that merits the exception. You keep that paperwork on file, but don't send anything to us, the Department of Labor. We're not going to pre-approve it. We're going to rely upon you, the small business with fewer than 50 employees, to document that this is too burdensome economically for you to follow. And again, if you don't have any money coming in the door, you don't have any money to pay anybody a paid leave. The plus side is you do get tax credits for the paid leave, but my counter to that is if there's no income, what difference does that make? So when the law was first passed, there was a lot of concern about it. As it actually seems to be working, I think it's more manageable than we first perceived.
So Wade, what are employment laws that could impact the small business owners' decisions?
Right. Well, the federal employment discrimination laws we hear about are still in force and effect. Those laws apply to employers with 15 or more employees, and the owner does not count. So if you're under 15, all of those employment discrimination laws do not apply to you. Now, let me rush to add, I think any good business acts in a way that's consistent with equal employment opportunity. But in terms of what the law mandates, it's only for employers with 15 or more employees. So when you make your layoff decisions or your furlough decisions, you need to have good business reasons for why you are picking the employees you select to be laid off or discharged, and why you are retaining the employees that you retain. You need to have, doesn't need to be particularly elaborate, but you need to be able to make the business case when you make that decision, why you're making that decision.
So I think a lot of small business owners are not really clear what furlough means, laid off. Can you explain all those differences? And I'm sure it has an impact on filing and the law.
Well, those terms are used pretty interchangeably and not with a lot of clarity. Let me back up and talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act for just a moment. Because again, that applies to 15 or more employees, employers with 15 or more employees. And once upon a time, you couldn't ask an employee about their sickness or very limited questions about their sickness. Once upon a time, you would never consider taking temperatures of employees as they walked into your business. Interestingly enough, there is a pandemic website that EEOC did back in 2009 about how pandemics interact with the ADA. So in the midst of this pandemic, you can ask employees about their illness. You can take their temperatures. The radar gun would be preferable to other methods. But you can do those things to make sure that your employees are safe. So I just wanted to make that reference. Now let's talk about furlough, layoff, discharge. Furlough and layoff are used somewhat interchangeably. The expectation is the employee will be coming back at some point in the future. Discharge means they're not coming back. As a practical matter, for furlough and layoff, if the employee is on a group health insurance plan, they remain eligible for that group health insurance plan. The question of how the employee premium gets paid for is a separate question. If they're discharged, that's going to trigger COBRA or the other conversion rights for insurance, and then that burden of the insurance would be on the now ex-employee going forward. What I advise employers is the term furlough or layoff isn't so important, or even discharge isn't so important, as long as you honestly communicate expectations. And as in so much of human relationships, it's the honest communication that's really important. And even with the furlough and layoff, the communication should be, we hope to bring you back, but we don't know when, and we don't know what that will look like.
Absolutely. I don't know anything. This is just unprecedented what we're all going through. And this is helping to bring a lot of clarity to the small business owner, because a lot of small business owners, they actually don't have the budget now to get this wonderful advice from an attorney. So I know you mentioned there were 3 things that you wanted to share with small business owners, 3 bullet points. About keeping your business intact and the need for adapting over the next you said 2 years. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, and let me mention one other law. I wouldn't be doing my job as a lawyer if I didn't, and that's the wage hour law, and that applies to all employers, no matter their size. So the law still remains, you have to pay at least minimum wage for every hour worked. And if someone works more than 40 hours in a work week, you have to pay them overtime. If someone's a salaried exempt employee, you have to pay them their salary. So what do you do about that in the face of a pandemic when work is limited and money is limited? Well, you can certainly reduce people's compensation as long as it's not below minimum wage. And if someone's salaried exempt, you could convert them to hourly and just pay them for hours worked. Now, the caveat is if they work more than 40, you got to pay them overtime, whereas a salaried exempt person, you would not. The question about long-term thinking, what I've noticed during this process, for me, I attended a Zoom conference the night of March 17, actually with one of my volunteer groups, and we were planning an event for June. And people on the call from the Northeast were saying we're going to have to cancel the event. And that did not seem real to me at the time, although we had canceled St. Patrick's Day. I got to work on March the 18th, and my phone started ringing off the hook with mostly businesses in the hospitality industry that had no business, no income, and were preparing to shut down. And that's what I've been dealing with since the middle of March, which now seems like a long, long time ago. But what I've noticed is that people are processing this in different ways and at different rates. It's a little bit like the stages of grief following the death of a loved person. There's a denial, there's bargaining, there's rationalization, there's grief, and finally some acceptance. And I'm finding people all over the map with that. But we're not going to turn a light switch and this is going to be over. It is unprecedented for those of us who are alive. If you look at history, there is precedent as recently as 1918 and the Spanish influenza pandemic that lasted for 18 months and it came in 3 waves. The lowest estimate of the number of people who died worldwide is 21 million, and that's the lowest estimate. I've already done some research on contract cancellation, and the precedent is from the 1920s when people were litigating contracts that were canceled during 1918 and 1919. So they're telling us that a vaccine is 18 months away, 12 to 18 months away, and that's fast track. That's fast track. 18 months from now is October of 2021. And then we've got to figure out how to give everybody the vaccine. So whether it's May 1st, 2020, when we get to go back to normal, it will not be normal. And people are going to be scared to travel. And quite frankly, people are going to be scared to come back to work. And so we've got to adjust our thinking for at least the next 2 years, I believe. Now, you hear the pundits on television say it's changed the world forever. I don't believe that. I don't think we human beings work that way. But in terms of business owners and community leaders and what the next 2 years look like, the next 2 years are going to be different than what we knew as recently as March 1st of 2020.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So are there any other tips that you want to leave with the small business owner that you really want to reinforce?
Well, I think it's easy for the small business owner to get emotionally isolated, emotionally socially distanced, if you will. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of anxiety. You're making decisions that impact other people's lives, as well as your own and your own family's lives. I think the silver lining, if you will, in all of this is that there's a lot of local leadership coming to the fore. And as I said, there's a lot of information out there that's being shared, most of which is good. You have to use some discernment, but the resources, Marjorie, like what you're offering, Tourism Leadership Council has put out a lot of excellent information. I can be as big a critic of the government as anybody, but the United States Department of Labor actually has a very robust website. The Georgia Department of Labor has a good website. So there's a lot of information out there, different trade groups, what's going on in hospitality. And then now as we do think about returning back to work, and how do we do that safely in a way that reassures our customers and our clients and our employees? There's already a lot of good information available on the web. I found a website today that Learjet, we're not all Learjet manufacturers, and especially in Savannah, Georgia, we're not Learjet manufacturers, but it's a great free website and tool about how you plan to reopen your business. And SHRM, for those of you with an HR hat, has a great website. Some of it's public, some of it's available only to members. So I think the silver lining here is that, you know, for those of us who are alive now, we say it's unprecedented. It is for us, and most of us weren't alive for the Great Depression or World War II. But what I see is people really stepping up and coming together and sharing. So small business owner, you're not alone. Even if you can't pay for the advice, there's resources out there available to you. And take a deep breath and take it one day at a time.
Wade, thank you so much for that wonderful advice and heartfelt message to the small business community. We really needed to hear that right now.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And if somebody would like to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way is to get in touch with me through my email. That's wherring@huntermaclean.com. And the McLean part of that is MACLEAN. Or you can go to our website and you can find me there. The email is going to be the best way to get me. And Marjorie, as we close, I just have to think about my mentor, my late mentor, Malcolm McLean. You can see part of his portrait in back of me. Mm-hmm. I had the great pleasure of being his associate for the first 15 years of my career. He was mayor of Savannah during the early 60s, and it was because of Mr. McLean and his leadership that Savannah largely peacefully desegregated. I can only imagine what he would think about where we are now. I think he would be interested and concerned, but he would find humor in it too. And so we have those examples from the past to serve us as we go forward in this new day.
Beautiful, beautiful way. Thank you so much for being on Open for Business, and to all the small business owners, stay well, look for support. There's lots of people out there that want to help you, especially during this pandemic. There is help out there. And please don't forget places like score.org. That's a free service, and those SCORE mentors are standing by. And the Small Business Development Center, they're also there that can help you, that can help all of us navigate this crazy, crazy time. So
yeah, thank you, Marjorie. I was remiss in not mentioning both of those. Those are both great resources.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll tune in next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.